Atlanta News First Plus starts now.
Thank you for joining us here at the First Alert Desk. We are focused tonight on Northwest Georgia. Voters casting their ballots in one of the nation's most watched congressional races, the special election to replace none other than Marjorie Taylor Greene in the 14th District. 17 candidates in the running, 12 Republicans, 3 Democrats, 1 Independent, and 1 Libertarian. Those are just the first steps in what will be a months-long fight to decide who ultimately represents this deep red district in Washington. Now, the race has drawn national attention, with Georgia once again at the center of the country's political spotlight. We're going to talk about that. I want to bring in Atlanta News First investigative producer Tim Darnell here with me. Tim, we've been following this since MTG's announcement that she was going to be stepping out of Congress, and we have seen so many candidates flood this race. And today is a very special day with a lot of focus on North Georgia.
It's a very special day, Maria. We're getting a chance to see one of the most sacred American democratic republic institutions take effect. That is when voters head to polls to begin, as you said, what's going to be a fairly lengthy process to determine their new congressional representative. I remember in late November, on a Friday night, as I recall, we began seeing reports that Marjorie Taylor Greene had decided to retire from Congress. This came very unexpectedly. It came after a series of a couple of weeks of very acrimonious confrontations between her and President Donald Trump. We all remember the time when Marjorie Taylor Greene, as a member of Congress, was one of the president's most fervent, most ardent supporters. Then we had a number of kind of politically cataclysmic events toward the middle to the latter part of 2025 that resulted in a major deep rift between the 47th President of the United States and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who had been in Congress representing Northwest Georgia's 14th congressional district since 2020-2021. She announced on a Friday night in November that it was around 8 or 9 o'clock p.m., as I recall, we began seeing social media reports that she was resigning. We came in the following day on Saturday to prep an all-new version of On the Record with Atlanta News First, where we focused really exclusively on her departure, what it meant. A lot of unknowns at that point in time. We did not know when a special election would be called. We now know that special election is happening right now, today, March 10th, 2026. The race initially drew 22 candidates, just an astoundingly high number for a special congressional election. You only see maybe less than a dozen or so candidates, and yet this is such a high-profile, very heavily GOP district in Northwest Georgia. We expect that it will remain more than likely Republican, and yet there is a chance that with so many candidates, and we've heard the Northwest Georgia 14th Congressional Republican Party expressed some concerns that with so many candidates that perhaps a Democrat could sneak into a first or second place finish because of the splintered number of candidates. If that happens tonight, we'll know, and that will be a political earthquake in and of itself. We have, as you said, 3 Democrats, 17 total candidates, with 3 Democrats, 1 Independent, 1 Libertarian, and the rest GOP, widely considered to be what will be a pretty comfortable win for Republicans tonight, but in a special election, all bets are off. You know, you can see there have been candidates in the past on the Democratic side who challenged Marjorie Taylor Greene for her seat. They were all unsuccessful, but we could see a mild political earthquake tonight.
And it has been interesting seeing the folks that were getting into this race have since got out of the race, the folks that are still standing here today on the special election day. I want to talk about two in particular, and that is one of the Democrats in the running and a current lawmaker as well. I want to throw things out to Atlanta News First anchor Rick Folbaum, who takes a look at some of the key candidates in this race as we wait to see the outcome of this March 10th election. Take a look.
This is a race that will receive national attention. The Northwest Georgia District includes portions of Cobb, Paulding, Floyd, and Dade counties, and President Trump won almost 70% of the vote there in 2024. State Senator Colton Moore told me that he believes he is the right person to fight for the district's conservative values. Moore made headlines last year when he was arrested at the state capitol. Officers took him into custody when he attempted to enter the House chambers despite being banned by Speaker John Burns. Senator Moore told me that he is not afraid of people using the arrest against him. In fact, he says it's one of his proudest moments.
Do you regret that episode?
No, I think probably one of my proudest moments in politics was being able to showcase the tyranny that exists at the Georgia State Capitol. It was not about me. It was about the people of Northwest Georgia making sure that they had representation. And it just so happened that they arrested me on behalf of the people of Northwest Georgia.
District 14 has been a reliably red district since it was established in 2013. But one Democrat is making his second attempt at winning the seat. Retired Army General Sean Harris ran against Marjorie Taylor Greene back in 2024. He is giving it another go. He told me he believes his life experiences make him the right person for the job.
As a retired brigadier general and a cattle farmer today, how do those roles allow you to represent Northwest Georgia and the values of the people of Northwest Georgia?
We have 40,000+ veterans that live in our district. But in addition to that, the #1 industry in the great state of Georgia is agriculture. My leadership from the military and what I'm doing today makes me very unique to be the leader that represents the people from Northwest Georgia.
Yeah, so just 2 of 17 candidates and some of the standouts that we've been following closely. Tim, your thoughts on, Moore and Harris being in this race and kind of what we've seen play out since MTG's announcement?
Well, as Rick was saying, Maria, he had interviewed State Senator Colton Moore. Let's get a little bit of a background on the senator. The reason that Senator Moore had been banned from the House chambers last year by House Speaker John Burns, and he was prohibited from entering the chambers when Georgia Governor Brian Kemp was giving his annual State of the State address. This was because Senator Moore had made some derogatory comments regarding another former House Speaker, David Ralston, who had passed away very kind of unexpectedly. He had been suffering from some health challenges for a while. Senator Moore went on the floor of the state Senate and denounced the late House Speaker as being corrupt, as a corrupt lawmaker. That drew rebukes not only from Georgia House Speaker John Burns, but also other GOP state senators and lawmakers. John Burns is not the kind of individual you want to get on the wrong side of. He is one of the most influential and important political figures in the state of Georgia right now. He prohibited Senator Moore from entering the House chamber. Senator Moore knew this. Was very forcefully arrested by some pretty large Georgia state troopers, and we saw some of that video arrest as well. Whether or not he did this for a publicity purposes or what his motivations were, but now we are hearing from Senator Moore telling our own Rick Folbaum that that was one of his proudest moments as a member of the Georgia General Assembly. You can make the argument that Senator Moore, who has relinquished his state Senate seat, there are several contenders who are seeking to replace him, is more along the lines of an earlier version of Marjorie Taylor Greene, very much of a firebrand, You can use the comment perhaps a political bomb thrower, very ardent and fervent in his support of President Donald Trump. On the other side of the aisle, we heard from Democrat Sean Harris, a retired Army Brigadier General who has challenged Marjorie Taylor Greene in the past, unsuccessfully of course. He might be considered to be really the only Democrat, the most realistic member of the Democratic Party who can place a first or second, or who can post a first or second place finish tonight. He mentioned there are more than 40,000 veterans in Northwest Georgia's 14th congressional district. Whether or not this is a district that has been drawn specifically, as most congressional districts are across the country. Georgia is not unique in this, but every congressional district, every state house and state senate district is drawn by the party who is occupying the majority in that state. Therefore, they're drawn to give that political party the best chance for retaining that seat. This has been a form of the American Democratic Republic since well after Reconstruction and before. This is nothing new. So for a Democrat like Sean Harris, or an independent or a libertarian candidate to make a strong showing tonight will be a very significant political development if it happens.
And there's certainly a lot of attention, as we mentioned at the top of the stream, around the nation from the president himself. I mean, even the president coming down a couple weeks ago, granted, to talk about the economy and the work his administration is doing in Georgia, but he also brought to the stage one of the candidates in this race, Clay Fuller. And so it kind of makes you think the level of investment that Washington already has in MTG's replacement in District 14, and this is a race with a lot at stake. I want to briefly get into Clay Fuller because I'm curious, Tim, why him? Of the 22, now 17 folks that are in this race, why Fuller?
I think you have to look at his record as a former district attorney for the Lookout Mountain Judicial Circuit, whether or not an endorsement from President Donald Trump is going to carry weight in this district. I would probably say that it will, and yet why Clay Fuller as opposed to some of the other more active figures in the 14th District Republican Party, like a Jim Tully, like a Star Black, like some others whom we have all interviewed as well. As you mentioned a couple of weeks ago, the president came through. He was in Rome. He brought Clay Fuller onto the stage. He also mentioned his endorsement for Georgia Governor Burt Jones, which is another story in and of itself that we'll get into later on at a future time, I imagine. But we're going to see really if Clay Fuller, if that endorsement carries him to a first place finish tonight. We're looking, as you said, what will be a weeks or months long process in choosing that next congressional representative, because with so many candidates in the race, it's an almost 100% certainty that we're going to see a runoff that will happen on April 7th. That the winner of that runoff, if they want to hold on to the seat for a full 2 years or simply fill out the rest of Marjorie Taylor Greene's term throughout the rest of this year, they will have to qualify for the May 19th primary. We're then looking at perhaps a June 7th runoff. And then we're looking at the November general election as well. It's very interesting when we were doing and compiling our list of candidates who have qualified for the May primary, several candidates in this race whose fate is being decided today and will be decided over the next month or so have qualified for the May 19th primary, including Clay Fuller, including Colton Moore, including several others, including Sean Harris. So obviously have very optimistic expectations that they will make the runoff and be ready to run for a full 2-year term on their own, starting in the May 19th general primary process.
And I keep trying to take folks back to our website, AtlantaNewsFirst.com. This is actually a story that you had put together. Hopefully it doesn't jump out of this story on me. But this is just a look, an easy way to see who all is in the running. And what stands out to me, Tim, is these are candidates from different backgrounds with different visions for Georgia's 14th district and for how it should be represented in Washington. And so I'm curious, for the voters who are going to these their polling place, who are casting their ballot with an overwhelming decision on their hands of candidates to pick from, what are the issues that are standing out to them?
It's interesting, Maria, because our own Abby Kasuris and I had a conversation. Abby is one of our outstanding statewide general reporters, and she has been spending a lot of time on the ground in the 14th district, as has our political reporter Doug Reardon. And you get the sense that they are more really interested in kind of moving away from some of the national drama that Marjorie Taylor Greene brought to the race. We know of her past controversial positions, some of which she has renounced, others she has not. But really, you have to look at how she was able to stay in office for so long and espouse some of what could be seen as some pretty controversial views. And that was because I firmly believe her office provided some very solid, very strong, basic constituent services. If I have a problem, if I need my veterans' benefits looked into, if I need help with any sort of federal issue, if I have a son, a daughter, a friend who wants to get an appointment or a letter of recommendation to a college, to one of the nation's outstanding military colleges, I don't care if my representative is throwing accusations back and forth at their colleagues on Capitol Hill. I need a fast, efficient response from my congressional representative. And that's what Marjorie Taylor Greene's office did for so many years. That's how a congressional representative stays in office, by being responsive and listening to concerns from his or her constituents. And by all accounts, Marjorie Taylor Greene's office did that very well. You get the sense from Abby Kasuris and Doug Reardon, that's what Northwest Georgia's 14th congressional constituents are looking for. Simply good, reasonable, responsible representation on Capitol Hill, and staying away from corruption and doing things that will really harm the constituent services that we all as voters deserve.
And we want to take a look at how things are going out in Georgia's 14th district. Again, Northwest Georgia has the nation's attention tonight as we watch closely for who will come out on top in this special election. But as polling places are open, as voters are making their way to their locations, casting their ballots, we want to check in with Atlanta News First Sarah Hammond with a look at how things are going.
7 o'clock this morning. It's been sort of a slow trickle of people coming in is how I think it's best to describe. Definitely people coming in, making sure they are voting. And as we know, of course, as they are, filling out their ballot for who they want to fill this seat, there are a lot of candidates on this ballot. We've got 17 candidates running for this open seat. We talked to one voter who was going in who said, yeah, that was a lot of people to kind of sift through. And he says it's, important for him to vote based off of policy, not just along party lines for him. So he said he was very careful to make sure to go through each candidate, what they stand for, and really making sure that he's voting based off of policy. So that's a lot of what we have heard from voters this morning. We hear a lot of the same message of, come out, make sure you are voting. You don't get to complain unless you cast that ballot, made your voice heard, no matter what the results are. And of course, we will be awaiting these results tonight, which will likely, because there are so many candidates, go into a possible runoff in April. So again, voters coming in, making their voices heard. But again, we had early voting as well. A lot of people took advantage of that. So it's been a little quieter, I think, here, at least based on what we're seeing here, actually on Election Day.
I know things are a little quiet over there. What are you looking for as far as the rest of today?
Yeah, so again, I think we're going to see this trickle of voters coming in. We know it's busy usually in the mornings before people come to work. We know usually around lunchtime. And again, the polls, they're going to close at 7 p.m. tonight. So important to note that, as long as you are in line before or by 7 o'clock, you will be allowed to vote, though I don't think that, a long line is going to be much of an issue based on what we have seen so far today. But I will say something that has been sort of a reoccurring theme that we've heard from a handful of people as they have shown up to their an incorrect voting location. So they're having to sort of reroute and make sure they're getting to the correct place. Some of them said, yes, we're going to continue on and go to that correct polling location. Some of them said, well, this was the only time that I had, so, oh, well, I guess I'm not going to cast that ballot now. So that's been a little bit of an issue that we have heard from, I'd say, about half a dozen people this morning, which is, again, is a pretty big sample size based on just kind of the small amount of voters that we've seen coming in and out of here so far this morning.
Talking with Sarah Hammond. And by the way, if you wanted to know your polling location, whether it's for District 14, maybe you're one of these folks that can vote, or any other election, you can go to our website at landnewsfirst.com. We have a full guide for you, as well as links where you can type in your information and know where to go. Sarah, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much. And Tim, I want to bring you back into this conversation because we are seeing not that heavy of a turnout, obviously, with the Northwest Georgia district being what it is. I am curious, which side benefits more from that, the GOP or the Democrats, with seeing a lower turnout?
You have to wonder if the Democratic Party and Sean Harris in particular will not benefit from a lower turnout simply because the majority of the 14th congressional district in Northwest Georgia is predominantly Republican. If that trend continues, you could see a scenario where Sean Harris is able to sneak into a first or second place finish. It kind of reminds me of the two Public Service Commission special elections we saw this past November when the Democratic Party was able to garner enough of a turnout simply because Republican voters did not turn out in an odd numbered year in a special election that allowed a couple of Democrats to earn seats on what had been a 5-member Republican panel on the Public Service Commission. Now, if Sean Harris and the Democratic Party are able to place first or second tonight, then we're looking at a special election come April in which low turnout might be another issue. General special election runoffs typically even turn out fewer voters than the actual special election itself. We see normal turnouts on primaries and in general elections. Special elections runoffs typically draw a smaller cadre of voters, if you will. So, yeah, it could be a very interesting scenario if we see, in the words of our own Sarah Hammond, a trickle of voters here and there at various polling places in Northwest Georgia from now until 7 o'clock tonight.
Certainly, and I just want to go through some of those dates because I feel like they're important whether you are a voter in Georgia's 14th district or you are watching this on a national impact level. April 7th, you mentioned, it was the runoff, May 19th being the statewide primary for that full 2-year term that would begin in 2027. And then June 16th, another possible runoff that, again, will shape up as we see all of this unfold. For the folks that are watching this that are like, that's not my district, I'm not even voting, why should this matter on a national level?
On a national level, Maria, it's simply because the National Republican Party has a razor-thin margin in the U.S. House of Representatives. President Donald Trump himself has said, and history has proven this to be correct, the party that controlled the White House usually takes a pretty good shellacking in the midterms during an off-presidential year. Our next presidential contest is 2 years from now, 2028. The 2026 midterms, both national Republicans and national Democrats are hoping and throwing everything they have into flipping those chambers to their party control. The Republican Party controls both the House and the Senate. The Senate by a much more comfortable margin by the U.S. House, simply because we've seen so many Republican incumbents retire, choose not to run for re-election. We had one Republican congressman announce earlier this week that he is turning independent and will caucus with the Democratic Party moving on. Now, will this seat stay Republican? Georgia's 14th seat will remain in the GOP column. More than likely it will. But if the Democratic Party can make a showing in this district tonight, you have to just believe that Georgia Democrats and national Democrats will be ecstatic at saying yes, the entire country here, even in this deep red congressional district, is getting tired of the economic policies being administered by President Donald Trump and his current White House administration. They're tired of the drama, tariffs, overseas conflicts, the list goes on and on. Democrats will use the results of this race tonight if they are able to secure a first or second place finish, which is still a long shot, as yet another indicator that the Democratic Party here in Georgia is back on the road to hosting or to holding some sort of political relevancy moving forward into the rest of the midterms and 2028, which will be a wide open presidential election. No incumbent. The road to the White House will lead through Georgia here in 2026 and 2028 and beyond. So this is a race. We call it the nation's most watched special congressional election happening today, and it certainly is.
Certainly is. We are going to take a break here. When we come back, you'll hear our Atlanta News First political reporter, Doug Reardon, sit down with the candidate endorsed by President Donald Trump, Clay Fuller, for a deep dive into what his vision is should he get the chance by the voters to take up leading District 14th in Washington. We'll be right back.
Clay Fuller, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Doug.
Appreciate it. So, this is a crowded field. The last check, as we're sitting here today, there's about 20 candidates just on the GOP side. But you're the candidate that's endorsed by President Trump. What does that do for your campaign? How does this set you apart from that very crowded field?
Yeah, well, first off, it was an honor of a lifetime. Not my normal Wednesday evening to get a call from the president. And I've told people it's really a lesson in maybe pick up the phone number that you don't recognize from time to time. It's not just a car warranty. So learned an important lesson there. But, when we started this race back in December, everyone said they're 100% Trump guy. And so we're trying to make sure that the voters understand that Trump has made a selection in this race. He's chosen our campaign, and we're the Trump candidate. And that endorsement, and this was in President Trump's words, he said, you're going to be a rocket ship based off of this endorsement. And that's what we've seen. And so now our job as a campaign is to make sure that everybody understands in Georgia 14 that we are the Trump-endorsed candidate.
Yeah, do you think that was a move by the president to maybe thin this field a little bit? Because we have seen a little bit of movement in the field with some candidates dropping out. And we'll talk about in a minute why it's very, in a jungle primary, kind of dangerous for one party to have too many people. I think you know that. But do you think this was an attempt by the president to thin this really wide field out?
No, I honestly think it was the president saying, this is the person that I want to be a warrior for Northwest Georgia, and who I think will be up here on Capitol Hill fighting day in and day out for my agenda. I think he looked at my bio and saw that we were the best candidate in the field. I was a Trump appointee in the first administration from 2018 to 2019. I've been fighting for him since he was elected in 2016. And that's one of the things that I articulated to his team. One of the main reasons that I even got involved in politics was the first inaugural address with the American Carnage speech. I was a prosecutor prosecuting really tough cases and seeing what was happening to our main streets out here in North Georgia. And he was the first politician in my lifetime who was speaking to those problems and to our communities. And I moved my entire family up to work for him in Washington, D.C. And I think that message in our bio resonated with him, and he looked at it and said he's the best candidate to come up here and fight for Northwest Georgians.
Yeah, dig a little deeper on that. Why do you think he was, let me try that again. Why do you think it was you that he ended up choosing?
Well, I think it really comes down to the bio. I think you'll see in his endorsements he appreciates people who have raised their hand to go into the military and defend our country. I think he appreciates someone who has been tough on crime their entire career and has been an America First prosecutor focused on putting the worst criminals away and making sure that they don't ever get out of prison. And then I think it really spoke to the entire Trump administration and to the president himself that, yeah, in 2018 to 2019, I moved my daughter in second grade, my 2-year-old son, and my beautiful wife up to D.C. so we could work for him.
Hey, tell me more about the work you did in the administration.
Yeah, so first part, so it was an incredible program that I was a part of. It's called the White House Fellows Program. And there's kind of a multi-step interview process. And you start off with a regional interview, then you, if selected out of the thousands of applications, you go with 30 other people for a national interview. And I'd been trying a rape case in Catoosa County and got an email that said, you needed to let us know if you want to be part of this interview process by close of business. It was like 4:30 in the afternoon. So I shot off a quick email to make sure that I could be part of the process. And the first person that I met there was a guy that went to MIT at 15, followed on by a Navy SEAL that was just coming in from Afghanistan. So I said, I don't think I have any business being part of this program, but managed to tell my story and get in. And part of what they were trying to find is their voice on the opioid crisis. And so as a prosecutor who had a lot of experience there, I was helping Kellyanne Conway and a number of people in the first administration try to find their voice there. Then I got moved over during the shutdown to work at the Department of Defense, doing mainly special operations oversight, and in particular one person that I worked with, his name is Ambassador Robert O'Brien, and he was the lead hostage negotiator at the time. And my job was to kind of plan trips for him across the world to make sure that he was getting an understanding of how Americans were being kidnapped in different countries. And he's endorsed us in this race, so it's a really remarkable full circle endorsement to get from Ambassador O'Brien.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that everyone on the GOP side was looking for that endorsement. I can understand why it would have kind of, as you said, rocketed you up up the name ranks, right? But do you see it as a problem that there are so many GOP candidates? You know, obviously it's been a while since this seat has been open, so a lot of people were bound to jump into the ring on it. But it's a jungle primary. We could be splitting votes here between not the biggest voter base in the world. And when we're talking about a special election, potential runoff, a general election, and then having to do it all over again for the midterms, do you see that as being potentially dangerous to the GOP?
Well, I'd say it's not a problem for our campaign. Obviously, if people stay in, that's going to be a challenge. My message right now is President Trump has made a choice in this race, and it's now time for us as a party to unite. The real tragedy, if people do stay in, and we have to go to a runoff on April 7th, that will be another month where the people of Georgia 14 don't have representation on Capitol Hill. That's the real tragedy. That's what campaigns really need to be thinking about, because our people in this district don't have a voice in D.C. right now. And that's the real tragedy that everyone in the Republican Party should be talking about. And that's the major reason that I'm trying to get out to a number of events to say, all right, it's time for the Republican Party to unite, get behind our campaign because President Trump has endorsed us, and let's get somebody in D.C. fighting for us on March 11th.
Yeah. What did you make of the messy way that things ended between Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene at the time and President Donald Trump?
To be honest, I wasn't even paying attention to it. So I was the elected district attorney for the Lookout Mountain Judicial Circuit. I was trying one of the biggest murder cases of my career, a cold case during that time period, and I was not even really paying attention to what was going on. I just wanted to make sure that I could get a conviction and fight for a victim in my community. I think that's probably true for most people in the district. They care much less about what's happening in D.C. They care more about just what's happening here at home. And so that's really been a message that I've carried to the voters as well. No one's really interested in any sort of disagreements in the past. They care about the fights of the future, and they want somebody on Capitol Hill who they know are going to be fighting each and every day as a warrior for them.
Yeah, now to that point, people certainly have gotten used to the way that Marjorie Taylor Greene represented them in Congress. Do you see yourself as falling into that vein, or do you want to do things differently if you were to be elected?
Well, I think it's based on my prosecutorial career. I don't know if you've ever gotten a jury summons. People aren't excited when that happens. They come into a courthouse, they're kind of frustrated about being there, and then you stand up as a prosecutor and you read the indictment, and the cases that I was trying were some of the most difficult and traumatic cases that a juror could come in and hear. So then they doubly don't want to be part of the case at that point, and then you have to select 13 people from your community that you have to, and they're from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different professions, different education levels, and you've got to convince them beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what I've done my entire career, and I was really good at it. And so part of my approach in this position, if it's part of God's plan for me to be the representative, is to continue to do that, to continue to convince people that they need to be on my side and convince them to a very high degree. So that's going to be my focus, but as a prosecutor, you also have that gear where you're used to yelling at murderers and rapists and child molesters. So you got to be in that courtroom and fight and stand up for what you believe. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be screaming angry in every conversation that I have. But I certainly have that gear.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. Were you a supporter of the way that Marjorie Taylor Greene governed when she was in office?
I think when you talk to voters around here, they appreciated her being an America First fighter on Capitol Hill. And that's certainly a banner I'm going to pick up and run with and continue to fight for Northwest Georgians. And we're up against some real challenges in D.C., and you need people with backbone, and you need people who are willing to stand up and fight for Northwest Georgians and have President Trump's back every day, and I can certainly do that effectively.
Yeah, and you actually ran this race already once back in 2020, and I know you ended up finishing fourth in that race. What do you want to do differently this time around?
Finish first. I want to win. I'm an extremely competitive person. I was the captain of my basketball team. So I care about winning, and the main reason is I think I'm going to be the most effective fighter for the people of Northwest Georgia here, and so that's going to be the main thing to turn around. To quote Ricky Bobby, if you ain't first, you're last. And so we're making sure that we're going to be first here.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about how your experience as a prosecutor has informed your run here up to this point, but if you were to get to Congress, you'd be dealing with things, I think, just on a larger scale, right? You'd still be dealing with community issues, but it would be an entire community and the gamut of issues that you would be kind of charged with dealing with. What would you be able to pull from your time in the courtroom to kind of inform your experience as a legislator?
Yeah, I think you're seeing that right now with a lot of the hearings related to Border Patrol, related to ICE. One of the challenges that I faced from 2020 to 2025 when I left the district attorney's office, we were having people die from fentanyl overdoses each and every day. And I quite literally saw over the last year, from January 2025 until now, I saw our fentanyl prices in the community increase, meaning supply was much more difficult to come in. And those policies to secure the border were quite literally saving lives in the Lookout Mountain Judicial Circuit. And so I think it's really important to have a national conversation saying, hey, this is really important for us as a policy to achieve because it's saving Americans' lives. There's a lot of people that don't know that the greatest killer of Americans 18 to 40 is fentanyl. No other cause causes more deaths in America than that. And that's another part when you look at what President Trump has been doing from a national security standpoint. It's very easy for me to, based on my national security background, my prosecutorial career, to say, look, when you're a national leader like Nicolas Maduro, and you're sending poison into the United States, I'm seeing it personally kill Americans. And for the first time in my life, I appreciate a president who's going to say, if you're messing around with Americans' lives, you're going to be held accountable for it. And I think we need people on Capitol Hill who can articulate that and have been on the front lines of that fight.
Yeah, Governor Kemp has been known for saying that every state is a border state. It sounds like you share that opinion.
Yeah, no, it's exactly true. Because we saw there, back in the early 90s, there used to be methamphetamine labs in North Georgia. Those don't exist anymore. Every methamphetamine and fentanyl that's in our community is coming across our border. It's being trafficked by the cartels. I think you just saw the shutdown of airspace in El Paso. The amount of money that the cartels are making off of killing Americans is a national tragedy. And we have to be clear-eyed about it. We have to be honest about it. And Governor Kemp is exactly right. There are no border towns. The entire country is. And that's why we're losing more Americans 18 to 40 to any other cause. And we've got to do something about it.
Yeah, tell me more about your policy in terms of just the platform that you want to make sure people understand about your run. You know, we've talked to other candidates about their education policy, certainly their healthcare policy. And if I could just start with healthcare, you know, that when we talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene, healthcare was really one of the things that kind of put that wedge between her and Donald Trump with these Affordable Care Act subsidies that shut the government down. This is something that we've heard from constituents all over the state of Georgia, is that it is very difficult for them to afford their health care, whether or not they were on those subsidies. They're still having a tough time, hundreds of dollars a month out of their pocket that some people just don't have. You know, from your perch in Congress, what would you be able to do to lower these costs?
Yeah, well, first off, I would talk to these individuals about having a very personal experience with it. So my personal experience it goes into how I think about this problem. We first have to go back and have an honest conversation that the Affordable Care Act came in under the Obama administration. This is a problem that has been created by the Democrat Party. So we have to be honest about who created the problems. Now, the personal side of it, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer at 31. I was newly married, had a 2-year-old daughter, and I was part of a single-payer system in the military, and I had terrible health care. I'm still in pain today. I still deal with so many of the repercussions from a 13-hour surgery where they ripped my throat open and scraped cancer off of my vocal cords. And so when I talk to individuals about the rising cost of healthcare, it's a very personal conversation for me because I've been through it. And the thing that I tell each and every one of those individuals is then we need to unite behind a policy that is going to get the federal government out of healthcare. That will immediately drive down costs. We got to allow people to buy health insurance across state lines. These artificial barriers, policy barriers that are making things more expensive are ridiculous. And you've seen recently with the Trump accounts that he's given to young Americans. I think ultimately putting health savings accounts together and allowing everyday Americans to be able to control their own health care and make their own health care decisions will help them get more price transparency and ultimately drive down costs. But it's a personal fight for me because I've been through it. And as one of the only person in the race who's been through a single-payer healthcare system and had it nearly took my life, it's a personal fight for me.
Yeah. Let me ask you about education, too, because that's obviously something we're hearing from a lot of Georgians now. you wouldn't be able to control what happens at the state level, right? But we've seen a big push this year in the Georgia legislature, and we've seen a lot of talk up on Capitol Hill about the state of education. That's something that matters, and I know this, and I know you know this. It matters very deeply to your constituents. But literacy rates are abysmal in Georgia. Teacher pay is abysmal in Georgia. What would you do to be able to fix those things? Do you see that as your role as a member of Congress?
Absolutely. Part of that is fighting to make sure that we're getting federal funding coming back to the schools that need it. But ultimately, one of those things, we just have to have an honest conversation that some schools, I'm a big believer in public education, but some schools are not being as successful because of the leadership that they have. And that's a personal experience for me post-COVID. We had to take our kids out of a public school that me and my wife loved and cared about, and we were lucky enough to have a school choice option. And that's something that I want to see for every Georgian in Georgia 14, is to make sure that they have school choice, and if they are going to a school that's not being run very well, they have another option where they can take their kids to a different program, different school. But first off, certainly going to fight to bring federal funds back to make sure that we are fully funding our education here, because those issues are long-term, almost a national security problem. If we aren't teaching our children to read, it's a national catastrophe, and we have to do something about it. The thing, we're big into college sports. If there was, at the University of Georgia, if the head coach of the Georgia football team had the performance that we have from an education standpoint, that head coach would be fired. And so we need accountability, but we need to make sure that we're fully funding these programs and then give parents the power to make a decision on where they want their kid to go to school. Yeah.
I think another thing that we've heard from a lot of candidates, Rome is kind of rife for a lot of economic development, if that is something that leaders in this area want to undertake. How much economic development do you want to see? What type of businesses do you want to see coming into the 14th District?
So I want to see the development that the community wants to see. With any sort of economic development, you have to have buy-in from the people who live here. So that's going to be a local conversation that I would love to be a part of. And so one of the things that we have to look for any economic development that you're having, first off, yeah, you want to grow as a community, but you also don't want to lose those characteristics that make a community special in the first place. So there has to be kind of a very real strategic approach on how you're going to do economic development. But the main thing for types of jobs that you want coming in, you want the type of jobs that are going to be here that are going to offer people the potential to have jobs going into the next century. Because the thing for me is I want a multi-generational approach where, let's say, if you're a fifth grader in a community like Rome or Rossville or Dallas, I want you to be able to stay in that community, raise a family on one paycheck, and live and work in the community where your ancestors are buried. And that's something that I really appreciate from President Trump's economic approach. You look at what he was doing from reorienting the global economic order to make sure that manufacturing was coming back to forgotten communities like ours. Because over the last 30, 40 years of economic activity, you can drive around Georgia 14 and see a number of empty factories that used to provide well-paying jobs. And so that's the thing that I want to see coming back, our manufacturing base. There's a couple of communities here in Northwest Georgia who have done really well with that. As for the other communities that I want to make sure they're mirroring the Romes and Daltons of the world to make sure that they have long-term economic activity that they want to see in their community. Yeah.
Let me get back to immigration for a sec, because I genuinely think you do have this unique perspective where you can see the impacts of it coming across your desk every day. The big debate now is how immigration reform is undertaken, whether it's done on paper, whether it's done in the streets. We've seen, obviously, we're well aware of what's happening in Minnesota with ICE. And in other communities around the country as well. We had DeKalb County just come out with a resolution saying that they did not want troops there doing these Operation Metro Surge operations, for lack of a better phrase. How far do you want to push the immigration debate here in the 14th District? Would you be okay with ICE coming in and running these Operation Metro Surges, in your constituency?
Absolutely. No, I'd welcome enforcing federal law. And these people in sanctuary cities, wherever they are, they're basically neo-Confederates. We settled this debate in the Civil War. If there's federal law, then federal law needs to be enforced. And that's simply what ICE is doing. And you see the problems that ICE is having are in communities where they don't have, they're being told there's no law enforcement support. And so we would certainly welcome them here. They would communicate well with our local law enforcement agencies. And the main thing is, it's amazing to me that it's controversial to get rid of criminal illegals who have been committing crimes in our community. It's shocking to me that Abrego Garcia, who was a validated gang member, had multiple domestic violence cases, and was newly indicted for human trafficking, that we've got to go through the federal judicial fight that we had just to get him out of the country. Here in Georgia, you just saw a case where I think his last name is Guzman, an illegal immigrant raped an 11-year-old child while her 10-year-old sister looked on. This shouldn't be controversial, that ICE should be able to come into every community in the United States and remove individuals like that. And Guzman, I would, if I was leading that district attorney's office for the Guzman case and that rape, we would be pursuing the death penalty in that case. So I don't understand the controversy in just letting ICE agents do their job. Law enforcement is difficult enough than having to face protesters who are coming and kicking and destroying your vehicles and making your job that much difficult just to remove an illegal sex offender.
Yeah, and devil's advocate on this, I think, certainly, yes, they have a job to do with removing criminals who have extensive backgrounds or even non-extensive backgrounds period, right? I think there certainly is a constituency in Georgia, in the 14th, outside of the 14th, who are law-abiding American citizens who are scared of the disruption that having Operation Metro Surge, things going on in their community, it does worry them. To those constituents who share your opinion that they don't want ne'er-do-wells in their community, if you will, but to those constituents who are worried about maybe the disruption that ICE could cause to everyday law-abiding American citizens, how do you convince them that it's something that the community needs?
I would say look at the Guzman case. I would say look at the Lake and Riley case. Those are the things that those citizens should be focused on. We are a nation of laws, and if we don't enforce our laws, then our society is going to fall apart. This is basic broken windows theory. I know that in New York City right now, they're going to start facing a crisis because they're not even enforcing, people who are jumping turnstiles. When you start to let little things go, when you don't enforce federal law, when you don't enforce basic broken windows theory, everybody's lives deteriorate and you get less safe. And I think what you've seen over the last year is really indicative of that, where the Trump administration is finally enforcing federal law when it had been ignored completely by the Biden administration. And what are the statistics that you're seeing? You're seeing the greatest drop in the murder rate in our nation's history. It's not a coincidence. And so I tell those people, if you have a problem with law enforcement enforcing law, then if you're going to stop them from doing that, get used to more burglaries, get used to more murders. And I don't think anybody in the U.S. wants to see more American lives be lost related to not enforcing the law.
Let me get back to the endorsement real quick. When you had your call with the president, I think we all saw his Truth Social post with the endorsement about you.
Y'all saw it before me.
Oh, there we go. All right. Well, fair enough. As long as you saw it, I think that's the important thing. But what was your conversation with the president like when he called to endorse you?
Yeah, so at first, like I said before, I ignored the call because I didn't recognize the number. Then I had somebody that was in the room in the Oval Office with the president who then immediately called me and said, "Hey, dummy, please pick up the next phone number." And so I picked it up, and it was just like a movie. I picked it up and said, "Hey, this is Clay." And there was a female voice on the line that said, "Mr. Fuller, if you'll please stand by for the president." And I was just, this is not happening. My wife had just walked out of the house. I got in this bird feeder which films the birds. So she was filling up the bird feeder. And we had about a 4 to 5 minute conversation. President Trump was clearly in a great mood and was just really just very complimentary to my background and why he was endorsing us and just really encouraging us to go out there and win the race. He was introducing me to a lot of people in the room. At one point he said I wanted to introduce you to your new boss. This is Speaker Johnson. And so it was a really, really fun conversation. And at the end, he just told me that our campaign is going to be a rocket ship now, and he's really proud of me. So it was really, truly the honor of a lifetime, not my normal Wednesday evening to get that call. And I came back in, and my wife and my 2 kids were sitting there, and my wife kind of looked at me like I'd seen a ghost, and she was like, "Who were you on the phone with?" And I said, "The President of the United States," and she just burst into tears. And so it was just one of those moments that I was able to share with my family immediately, and it'll be something that I'll never forget.
Yeah, now if you do get to Congress, you're going to be facing a lot of gridlock. We don't know what the makeup of that body is going to look like, in November or before that, with some of the other special elections. But are you willing to work across the aisle? Is that something that you strive to do, or is it something that you do only in certain instances? And how do you beat gridlock in a place that is so dug in as it is up on Capitol Hill?
Well, I go back to my career as a prosecutor. My job, I'm always going to stand for my principles and what I believe. And I think my career, I've shown that when people are coming into a skeptical situation about my position or for them even being there, I'm very good at presenting the facts and the evidence and making the argument to convince people to come over to my side. To be honest, I think the proper question is, are the Democrats even willing to work with us? You look at the Maduro raid, so many people currently on Capitol Hill, they were on record in 2021 saying, something should be done about Maduro. And then it was a 180 as soon as we snatched him up and perp walked him into the Southern District of New York. I don't know if there's a side that we can even really negotiate with. But for me, I'm always going to take the opportunity to convince anybody to come to my position, because I have a firm belief in what I'll be fighting for, and think that ultimately the truth is on our side for the policies I'm going to be fighting for. And I think the American people are behind it. A good example is the SAVE Act, which currently passed the House. That's a really 80-20 issue across just Americans. I think on the Republican side, 95% of Republicans support it. On the Democrat side, I think 72% of Democrats support it. And then you see the obstinance just from the Democrat side. They can't even vote with us on this bipartisan issue across the entire nation. So I don't know if there's much of a willing partner there to even convince them on 80-20 issues, but I'll certainly try, and I can certainly bang my head against the wall if I need to. But ultimately, I'm going to stand for truth. I'm going to fight for what Northwest Georgians sent me there, and I'll continue to be a warrior for them. But I will always try to have a good faith discussion with somebody and convince them.
Yeah.